we're going to be covering. We didn't quite finish chapter 2 last time, so we're going to be finishing chapter 2 and hopefully getting through chapter 3 as well. So first off, of course, as always, Dilga, Morbite, how you guys doing?
Hi.
I'm doing pretty good. What's up?
Yeah, fine as well.
Nice. I quit my job this week. Holy shit. So
You don't fucking say.
yeah, that was quite a thing. But it's a good thing. I'm here now and probably gonna have a little bit more time to be focusing on this sort of stuff. So yeah. So as I recall, we were at the end of last time we were kind of just getting through doing some like mental game of poker analysis on some of the stuff that Josh Waitzkin had been going through in some of his formative chess years. So I think where we were, if I recall correctly, was just finishing this like second bullet point here. The quote being, "Was I a loser? Had I let my parents down? What about the guys in the park, Bruce, my friends at school? How could I have lost? One of the problems with being too high is that there's a long way to fall. Had I fallen in my own eyes, or also in the eyes of those around me? After trying so hard, was there any worth outside of winning? An 8-year-old is hardly prepared to deal with such loaded issues," right? And then I had said, like, what might we say to Josh if he's having these kinds of thoughts and he's like a student of ours, right? Like, what's the sort of thing that we might be saying? And we were getting a good bit of the way through breaking down, like, I'm a loser, right? And we had said it makes sense to feel like a loser because you lost, right? You didn't meet your expectations, and your opponent maybe laughed at you and berated you and called you a loser, right? And the things that we had said in response were things like, just because you lost doesn't make you a loser, right? Being a loser is never winning, right? Losing one game means that you lost one game, right? As far as not meeting your expectations, right? You control your effort, not your results, right? You need to expect to lose some games, and if you learn to do that, then you won't be disappointed, because it won't be something surprising to you anymore, right?
Maybe it's less, expecting that you have to lose some rather than because like that might be a mind shift problem. Where instead maybe you can say something like, you just can't win them all, right? You just can't win them all, which at least in that case, doesn't imply that like you expect to lose sometimes, which could cause problems insofar as like, oh, I'm behind or whatever, I'm just gonna lose. So
yeah, I see that. I see that. That's a good distinction to make. Sure. Another thing that we had said was you are not defined by your performance, right? People tend to do a lot of attaching of their ego to their results, and like, I am what I do, not and like that's my method of forging an identity, right? And if you define yourself by your wins and losses, then yeah, you're gonna have a rough time every time you go through a loss streak. So if instead you learn to identify a little bit more with your effort instead, and say, I'm a hard worker, I'm somebody who takes this seriously, I'm somebody that tries really hard, then those are things that are more stable, right? You will go through motivation issues just like everyone else, but those are less crushing in a lot of ways. It feels like you have a little bit more control over them than you do results. And then another thing is, if your opponent laughs at you, right? it can help to try to understand why they're saying that, right? And to realize that in a lot of cases, people aren't saying it to make you feel bad. They're saying it to make themselves feel better because they, yeah, sure, we'll go with that. No, you're the loser, exactly. Yeah, right. So, you do get a lot of that. But yeah. So I guess to kind of jump into the next thing, it would be, well, I guess actually we kind of covered a good amount of it, right? Like, if I let my parents / others down, it's a lot similar to the sort of stuff that you see in the first couple of responses, right? In response, the responses that we gave to, like, you didn't meet your expectations, right? It's like your expectations, somebody else's expectations, they're roughly the same, I think. Or actually, maybe not. What do you guys think? Is that like a different thing?
I'm afraid I didn't really understand the question.
Does that look right?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I believe it. So the question is, would we say anything different to somebody who feels like they let, like, other people around them down, right? Like, what would we say to people like that? And would it be similar to what we would say to somebody who thinks that they're a loser? Or would it be different?
I would say that oftentimes it's usually a judgment that people put on themselves, right? It's like, in most cases, in the vast majority of cases, if, you're a chess genius, right, and you lose a tournament, your parents probably, they won't care that you lost your tournament. Like, they'd want you to have enjoyed yourself, right? It's like, presuming that they're, decent people. And
precisely. What if they aren't decent people?
Well, because the other dude's parents, like, his dad apparently was a huge dick to him when he lost, so that's what Josh White's gonna talk about. The other kid's, like, really overbearing dad.
So
if the parents weren't decent people, then it would have to be, understand that the things that we put on ourselves are often much stronger feelings than other people put on us. So it's like, if we feel like we let someone down, then we have to understand that, like, either that's true and we did, and we can't control that, so, the best of our energy should be going to focused on the next time that, those people are relying on us, or we didn't, and that means that the bulk of our efforts should be going on improving ourselves the next time, right? So it's like, either way, you follow these lines of thought, and it leads you to saying, I will focus on doing better next time, right? So, like, I don't know that there's really any problem with feeling accountable to other people regarding that.
I think you raised some good points. It's things like the past is the past, right? You can't control it, right? So if they're, when we look at, like, what are, like, the three major points of, like, a good apology, right? It's, I'm sorry, which basically means, like, I feel bad about it, right? There's like, well, I think that's actually the second thing. It's like, the first is I'm sorry, the second is I feel really bad about it, and the third is I will do everything that I can to not have that happen again in the future, right?
Yeah, where it's like, you have to be like, I'm sorry because I did the thing, right? You have to take responsibility, and then you have to say, next time this is what I'll do differently, and I hope you can forgive me. Those are the kind of things that I look for when I'm trying to make an apology.
And so, in all of that, what you have to realize is that, like, your obligation, if you let somebody down, right? Who you care about and who you value the opinion of, right? Then your obligation is to make the apology and to follow through with the intent behind that and to really try. And if they, at that point, still hold a grudge or respond poorly, there's not a whole lot that you can do about that. And so
It's kind of like
it's a matter of like
thing
acceptance.
about locus of control. Yeah.
Right. And so, you know, one of the things that I've been preaching for years and years and years is like ancient Roman Stoicism, right? And the idea of like the only things that matter are the things that you can control, right? Because if you spend energy and time thinking about things that you have no control over, it doesn't make any difference, right? Whether you do your thinking about it or not, it doesn't change anything, right? And, you know, it's like, well, you could say like, okay, but you can like influence things, right? The fact of the matter is that influence, if you can influence something, generally it means that you're too far zoomed out, right? You need to actually break the situation down further into smaller pieces, right? So like let's take solo queue as a really fantastic example, right? You have influence over the outcome of the game. Right? What does that mean? It means that, well, you know, I mean, it's like the things that you do matter, but they're not going to be the only thing that matters in the outcome. You're just one of 5 players on a team against a team of 5 other players, right? And each of those 9 other players is going to influence the outcome of the game just as much, if not more, than you, depending on how things play out, what the matchups are, and all that kind of different stuff, right? And so the key thing to remember is like, okay, if I have influence over the results of the game, right, what are the mechanisms by which I have influence over the results, right? What are the things that I have control over that then by extension allow me to have influence over this other thing, right? And when you start thinking about that, you start saying, okay, it's how I play, it's what I type, it's how I think about the game, what I learn, all these different things that are related to your thoughts and your actions. Because what you find out is in life, these are really the only things that you actually have full control over, are your thoughts and your actions, right? And this is what people really mean when they say focus on yourself, right? It's your thoughts and your actions are the only thing that you have control over, and so they're the only thing that you actually need to worry about, right? You can spend all of this time thinking about what your teammates are saying and how poorly the game is going or how well the game is going, how your rank is going up and down, all these different things. But in the end, you thinking about those things and worrying about those things and like, oh my god, like I see so many people like posting on Summoner School and they're like, how does the LP system work? And like, I don't know, like that's like an educational question, you know what I mean? Like they're missing the point that like you understanding how the LP system works doesn't make you gain or lose LP any faster or slower, because the only thing that you control is not how the game is designed, but how you play and how much you play and all that kind of different stuff, right? So you don't need to worry about all of those things. It's not that like they're out there and you can worry about them and it doesn't matter whether you do or not. It's that you should actively seek to anytime you find yourself thinking about those things, try to remember to put them out of your mind, because it's not useful, right? And I don't know, there's a nugget here that's really, I feel like, difficult to communicate, but once you really grasp what it means for you to not need to care about all the things that you don't control, you actually stop caring about them, right? It actually helps you to distance yourself from them, and you find yourself not thinking about them anymore, right? And that comes with this wonderful sense of relief, or at least it did for me, when I kind of discovered the philosophy in high school.
Sorry, I was dealing with my internet connection, and yeah, we were dealing with the other people's expectations. And so I agreed with what Meribat was saying. Sorry if I'm going back a bit.
No, go for it.
Wait, to wrap my there's also the idea that do you really want to like give value to people that would care about you only winning? Like, let me rephrase that. Do you want to give value to people that only give you value if you ever win? That's
a really
worded
good
properly.
point.
Yeah, right. Like, is that a healthy
It's like-
relationship in the first place?
Yeah, is that
Right, because
because
it's like, you know,
winning is not gonna happen?
winning and losing happens either way, right? And if you
Yeah.
have people in your life trying to tell you that if you don't win, then you don't amount to anything, then it's like you start to sort of identify with winning rather than playing the game, right? So it's like it's the point where, like, for example, where it's like I start to, I think, try or develop the idea that I have control over whether or not I win or lose, because for me at least, not as much now, but it used to be that I would identify so much with winning that like I would go in the game and then get kind of mad at whatever happened that makes the idea or the chances of me winning go further down the drain.
Appleton, I don't know what you're doing, but you're drowning out more by the noise.
Yeah. For the record, I have it muted on the recording, but not on
Okay.
Discord. My bad.
Good attempt.
So
Yeah.
what ended up happening is I would try, because I felt like I could win every game, I would try really hard to win the games that I was starting to fall behind in through forcing, high risk, even like sometimes high risk, low reward plays, or just like even plays with no reward. Even if I make it work out, it's not like it's gonna really increase anything because it wasn't that good of a play to begin with. And then, I'd make those plays and then I'd fail them invariably, which makes the chances of me winning go down even lower, right? And so then I would keep doing it, and eventually, I'd have like an 8-game losing streak and be like, well, what the hell is going on? And then, I always make this realization that like, well, I can't control, but then I win every game. And, it's been until really recently that I started to realize that I really identified with winning rather than playing the game. And I think it's a mindset that I keep coming back to, where I do pretty good for a while, and then I kind of like creep back into that sort of old trying to win attitude rather than playing well. And I think that kind of goes back to I always assume that people won't like me or whatever if I just like don't win, but I mean that's just not true. I mean, like, imagine if I came here right today and I was like, I lost 3 solo queue games, and you were just like, be gone from me. Right?
Be gone, himself.
Did I do that?
And it's like actually ridiculous. Like the idea that's like people would do that is actually ridiculous. But like, the fear is there that like, well, if I don't ever get out of Platinum 4, then then I'll never prove that I can be as good as I can be, and then sort of this vicious cycle happens where I keep playing in my mind of like people like starting to hate me because I'm still in Plat 4 after 6 months or whatever. So
Yeah, and I was dealing
definitely
with
relate to
that worry of just staying where I am and just never making progress and feeling like I'm just going back on like not making progress. And so I was dealing with that this week, like very, and so I ended up like I came to the conclusion like part of it is you other people's expectations aren't actually the ones you think they are mostly, and if they are actually as bad as you fear that they are, they probably don't matter, right? And so I run the experiment of I'm just gonna ask one person for the obvious sample size mean, and see what the person says about that. And so I was like, yeah, I was thinking about of the expectations you have of me regarding that. And she was like, I don't give a shit if you win or lose, or if you make it or if you don't. As long as you try, you're cool. And I was like, oh, Oh, so it really do be like that.
It really actually do, yeah.
That must have been cathartic for you, definitely.
Yes. Fucking no.
All right. So, I think I have let myself down is very much the same as you didn't meet your own expectations. I think that's basically identical. Yeah. How about let's go on to even the very last one, right? There is no worth outside of winning after trying hard. If you try hard, you have to win. So, why does it make sense to think that?
Because if both people try hard, but then one of them is
really
going
freaking
to
hard,
lose.
you lost. I feel like a slap in the damn face.
Because
Yeah.
if both people try hard, they lose. One of them loses.
Yeah, so, ostensibly, the reason you're trying hard is because you're trying to win, right? If you don't win, you haven't reached your goals. Right? I think a lot of the other stuff too is that you'll find that actually society kind of enforces this, right? There is no worth outside of winning, because when you look at like tournament structures, right, you find spaces where if you win or you place highly, then you get rewarded, and potentially you even you're even able to like sustain your own livelihood by winning, right? And if you don't win, then generally you get no reward, and sometimes you maybe even have paid an entry fee and you've actually lost something as a result, right? So there can be actual like monetary issues going on there.
I was reading in a book super recently, and I don't remember what book it was, but they talk about the idea that, I think it was mindful learning, actually, where society puts these expectations on people, but it's not like they do it like on purpose. It's like the people are just raised up to believe that performance is the same as results, is the same as skill. I mean, if you think about K to 12, for example, you do a thing and you're graded on whether or not you are failure, you're barely scraping by. If you're average, you're pretty good, or you're excellent, right? And so you do these 10 set of 10 problems, and then they grade you based on how you do, right? Where it's like that doesn't really help learning all that much, because what happens is you become so enamored with getting the A plus that studies have shown that people will cheat just to get A's to protect their ego, right? So they'll just be like, I'm just going to go get this test here and then cheat on it so that way I can get my A. And it doesn't matter whether or not I know the material, because all that matters is I got my A, right? So it's like
I am guilty as fuck of that.
It goes back to kind of this, where it's like, if I don't win, then that means I'm useless, so I will do everything I can to win. And if I lose, then that means that I'm worthless, because everything is based on performance in society. And so we get that really deep shame in there that if we lose, then we're not doing the thing right.
So with all of these reasons, let's now go back and let's start to break down some different ways to think about it. So, ostensibly, the reason that you're trying hard is because you're trying to win. If you don't win, you haven't reached your goal, and in fact, you may have even made negative progress towards your goal, right? If you're playing on a ladder, you lose LP when you lose.
I feel personally attacked.
So,
at least I'm not the only one who feels personally attacked this time.
Yeah.
So, you tell me then, person who feels personally attacked, how is it that we can think differently about this?
I'm sorry. God damn it.
I completely agree with you. I think, God damn, it's a really good answer.
That's all there is to it. And
Took the words right out of my mouth.
fuck. Sorry about sorry about that.
You're totally fine.
So profane. Truly a deep and sensitive
Oh, God.
issues.
Yeah. So how do you care about it? How do you care less about that? Will you just
How do you deal with feeling like you maybe haven't made progress towards your goals, or in fact you've made negative progress towards your goals when you lose?
you measure your progress by something that's not subject to variance, but only your work?
Mm-hmm. So like what?
So you make a list of skills you want to learn and your your current state of the skills, like how good you are at them, and then you evaluate them in the context where variance has no impact. Like you take the variance out of the game to understand.
So can you give like an example of this for somebody who this might be like a new concept? Like obviously I get what you're talking about. But...
Yeah. So let's take an example. A really concrete. Using the F keys while you're clearing camps or laning, right?
Sure. Yeah.
That would be one. It's if you're playing and like you're losing LP, then what it tells is that you're losing LP. It doesn't tell you if you've actually improved at using your F keys or not, right? So the only way to measure that would be record your gameplay and check how many times you did it, and then if there's any chance compared to before. And that's one way of making progress.
Yeah, and to feel like you're making progress, to be able to point to a game from a month ago and a game from a day ago and be like, in that game from a month ago, I F-keyed 0 times, and in the game from yesterday, I F-keyed like 20 times over the course of the laning phase, right? Like that's clearly a skill has been built here, and you can say that that's progress. I will mention though that, and this I think again you're going to feel kind of personally attacked here, right? The next thing that you kind of run into if you start trying to adopt that kind of mindset is, okay, so I've improved at this skill, and my LP still hasn't gone up. So what now?
Hey.
Right?
Hold up. Yeah, like this is
So
I'm gonna go erase those messages that I typed last night.
so yeah. So I know that like all three of us have kind of been working on this kind of an issue for a long time. So what conclusions have we come to so far? Have we come to any conclusions so far?
For me, I've found that
same.
it's like it's not that I don't know that I've gotten better. It's that I don't understand why I can be so much better and still lose. And what I've come to realize, today I just kind of did a bunch of mental hand histories and kind of just grinded through a bunch of them, and kind of found that like there's this block in there where it's like I feel like I believe that I can win every game, or like that I have to win every game, and that if I don't win every game, then that means I'm not better, which is clearly a fallacious statement, right? Because it's like the game's designed as you get better to put you against better opponents, which means that unless you're literally the best person in the world, you'll never achieve a 100% win rate. And so, it's really hard for me to reconcile these two thoughts, because it's like, for me, it's like, if I'm not winning like 80% of my games, then that means I'm not good enough, right? Which is funny because, the game's designed to put you at a 50% win rate. So it's like,
yeah.
I'm at like a 53% win rate, which actually still isn't that bad. It's just not fast, right? Like, plus my MMR is super low, so it's not like I'm gaining LP anyway, so. But I came to realize that like I feel like I should be able to control how much games I win, and then so I go into game trying to figure out ways I can control the game through maybe factors I can't control, or forcing desperate plays because I'm like, if I don't do something to get ahead right now, then I'm not going to have control of this game. So I'm just going to go yeet myself into their enemy bot lane. And then it doesn't work, and I lose control even more. So I try to yeet myself again until I've yeeted myself 3 or 4 times, and I'm like, okay, all right, I guess I'll just sit back. And it's like, if I understand that I've gotten better, then I need to let my gameplay do the talking rather than let my brain do the talking, if that makes sense. And also understand that solo queue isn't a game of, forcing wins or forcing losses. It's about maximizing your impact in as many ways as possible to essentially give yourself a higher chance of winning. So it's like, basically, if I play well, I have a higher chance of winning. And that's it.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean that you will win. And in fact, you can have a 99% chance to win a game, still lose 3 games in a row. That's improbable, but possible, right? And
Right.
People all the time, right, have a really difficult time kind of wrapping their head around probability, right? And so I think one of the things that Jared Tendler recommends is to actually spend some time with the statistics department, and really start to kind of gain an understanding of things like regression to the mean and like what it means for something to be random, what it means for something to be probable, and kind of if you can find a way to get your head around the math, then that understanding can actually give a lot of relief, because again, it's like we keep returning to this idea, right? But like, if you feel disappointed at any point, what disappointment is it's an expectation that hasn't been met, right? So when you go into games with an expectation that you should be winning all of them and you start losing some, then you feel disappointed because your expectation hasn't been met, right? And you have to, in order to correct that expectation, you need to learn, right? You need to learn why that expectation is false, and you need to be able to prove that to yourself, right? And so, as boring and tedious as it may sound, right, learning more about statistics, learning more about probability can give you a greater understanding for why it's not reasonable to expect to win every game, right? And in games like League that don't feel like they have a whole lot of, I know it sounds stupid to say, right? But like, they don't feel like they have a lot of variance. When you look at like the game design portion of it, right? Like the only real like RNG in the game is like crit chance, right? But and I guess like minion RNG, right? But like, yeah,
random.
Yeah, it's really well distributed.
Yeah, it's like
right.
really weird.
So they've done some like smoothing stuff on it and everything, and so the game is very, as games go, it's very low variance, right? I mean, there are some games that you can find that have literally no variance, but like this one's pretty darn close, right? And so,
you mean in terms of like just video games, or like just
just like games in general, right? I mean, like if we take a look at like chess, it's like the ultimate game that has no RNG, right? It's like literally 100% straight through repeatable, right? League of Legends is most of the way there.
Well, so if you're leaning toward the argument that like the variance that's in League is all about your teammates and like who you play against,
that's what I was getting.
You can make the argument that chess is also the same, where like one game you can play against a dude who has 300 elo, the next game you can play against Magnus Carlsen, right?
Precisely. And so it's a matter of understanding that even though it feels like it's not part of the game's design, matchmaking itself is pretty much by definition a form of variance, right? It's going to match you with a random opponent who has a similar rating to you, not a similar skill level, a similar rating, right? And I'm sure I've posted that video of Day 9 talking about the difference between rating, ranking, and skill enough times that that's that's a thing, too, right? Buddy. Yeah, but so understanding that there is some variance there, and the other thing too, and this is I think another one that people really sort of struggle with, right, is really starting to internalize that your performance itself will also be variable, right?
Mhm.
When you sit down to play a game of League of Legends, you have never played that game of League of Legends on that day sitting in that position before. You know what I mean? Like, time doesn't go backwards, or you can't leap into the future, right? Like, there is, each moment it happens only once, right? And so in the most literal way, right, each game is different because it happens at a different time, right? But in a more conceptual way, right, factors are going to affect how you play, right? How well rested you are, what else is going on in your life, any number of different things, right? And so you're how well you understand the various different skills that are going on, how mentally aware you are today, whether you've had coffee or not, all this kind of stuff is going to affect the outcome of your performance. And so if you play really well one game and then play really poorly another game, doesn't mean that your skill got worse. It means that you hit the low end of your range. And again, it's that probabilistic thing, right? Where like most of the time you're going to play average, because that's what average means, right? It means what happens most of the time. But then some games you're going to play out of your mind well, some games you're going to play really terribly. And that never goes away. No matter how much you practice, you always get that range, right? You can control where those endpoints are. You can control what your highest high is, and you can control what your lowest low is. And by extension, what's in between.
To an extent, it depends on like the person a bit, but sometimes you can kind of half control like what, like if you're like in your B game, it's really hard to like move from your B game to your A game, but depending on like where your emotional state is at, you can still play like a high B game versus a low B game or whatever,
Mhm.
right? And you can kind of stop yourself from going lower, but it's super hard to like until you really kind of dig into what it means to feel good about your A game or feel bad to play your C game. It's really hard to kind of control that.
Mhm.
That's some of what Mental Game of Poker 2 gets at, where it's less about it's more about improving your A game, but also learning how to be on your A game more often through sort of taking like copious amounts of notes, figuring out what makes you feel good versus what makes you feel bad, and certainly I think that it's really hard to have 100% control over it. But I also think that it's
Which is
definitely possible to add some control over it, right? So it's
yeah, and that's
not
why
a
I
lot
would
of
say
people-
like use the word influence, right? Don't use the word control, right? So that you can remind yourself that
Fair
it's
enough.
not something that you can control, and there is no such
But
thing as
also-
partial control, really. Or
Yeah, so the big thing is I just don't want people to feel like, oh, I'm on my C game today, so I have no
yeah,
guess I'm
no influence
shitty.
over it.
Right, so it's like,
Yeah.
well, maybe if you're on your C game and you found out that like, oh, if I'm feeling bad and then I go like,
Mhm.
take a quick shower or something, I'm no longer on my C game, and now you have a way to take a break and
Mhm.
go get cleaned up for you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
it's like,
If I took a shower every time I lost a game of League of Legends, I would be so clean. Are you kidding me? Oh my god, I would be spotless.
I would be as clean as my Lee Sin gameplay.
Precisely.
so
Either did you that I don't lose games, or that my Lee Sin is actually very dirty. There are two, whether based on your opinion.
Not to make fun of the idea, though. Truly, it is actually a really good idea to start to understand what puts you in the various different places in your range, and to
right, because like I've been learning a lot about what puts me in A versus C game. So and you can sort of see that like I'm very rarely on C game now. I mean, when I am, it's still super self-destructive, but it doesn't happen as often anymore.
It has only happened once that at around 10 a.m. my time you send messages on Discord saying that you are absolutely worthless. So it's happened only once in the last 6 months or so yeah, it has indeed had effect.
Alright, you know what?
Got
We'll
him.
have to go Desperate Housewives meme on your ass.
Oh, be my guest.
The lady who has the angry point.
Oh yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yes.
do.
Okay.
Be my guest.
So
But that's actually the first time I've been on, like a really emotionally low C game for
Yeah,
say
it had been
over
a while.
like a month or two. So it's like
Yeah,
it's fewer and farther between. Whereas like you guys remember, a couple of months
It
ago,
was
it would have been
every
like once a week
every
or
damn
every
day.
day or something like that. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yep. It
I
works.
mean that's definitely progress.
It is.
And it is.
Even if it feels just as fucking bad, it doesn't matter because I feel that bad much less often, right? So
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yep. So, with having strayed quite far away from the text, I think we should return to it. Yeah?
Quite.
So, so let's tackle the next quote. So one of the things that Josh Waitzkin did right after he lost the Nationals, right, which was kind of the major event of this
Like the
particular
complete
chapter.
failure that he is.
What a loser! God. The next thing that he
guy can't even win worlds. Fucking what a scrub lord.
The next thing that he did is he decided to go, or his family decided to go fishing, right? And he says on this, I have come to understand that these little breaks from the competitive intensity of my life have been and still are an integral part of my success. Times at sea are periods of renewal, coming together with family, being with nature, putting things back in perspective. I am able to let my conscious mind move away from my training and to gain creative new angles on the next steps of my growth. Right? So, I find this really interesting because it runs somewhat somewhat perpendicular to the message that you get from Mental Game of Poker and Jared Tendler, right? Where the idea there is that taking breaks is like a band-aid fix, right? Really don't want to do it that often. It's just a matter of like you know what I mean?
Yeah, the emotion's still there.
Yeah,
it's just,
the idea is like if you have to take a break to digest some emotion, you should just fix what's giving you that emotion rather than continuously take breaks to try to digest that. But I think there's a really interesting thing here that he kind of mentions that I've actually also found to be true just kind of in my own life, right? And that is he's not only saying that he's able to kind of disengage from the training and take a break and let the accumulated emotion kind of digest, but also he mentions gain creative new angles on the next steps of my growth, right? And this is something that I have found to be super duper true, right? Which is the idea that for the creative process, right? Rest is a tremendously important ingredient, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're trying to learn and you're trying to come up with new strategies and to refine those strategies and all that kind of different stuff, right? Burnout is a real problem, right? And so I think that it's not to say that taking breaks is bad. It's to say that taking breaks specifically because you're so tilted that you just have to in order to regain even some semblance of control over your gameplay, that's not good, right?
Yeah.
But even if you don't have problems in your mental game, right? Taking breaks can be a really important part of continuing to play at a really high level, because making sure that you're getting enough rest and making sure that you're giving yourself space to be creative. Like this is the point that I wanted to make, right? I do music, I come up with League of Legends theories, and I don't know, I fold origami. There's like several different things in my life that I do that are creative, right? And in my day-to-day life, there is very, very little like unstructured time, right? Like I used to go to work, come back, eat dinner, do coaching, go to bed. No real free time aside from a couple of hours to play some games and keep up on the meta, right? And even then, right? Like that's like work, right? You know what I mean? It's not resting, right? And so when I found that I gave myself very, very little rest, any ability to be creative just went completely out of the window, I have found throughout my life that if I am not having periods in my week where I am bored for like more than an hour, then I never get into a creative headspace. It just doesn't happen. And being able to regularly take breaks and kind of allow yourself to just be a little bored can really help you figure out kind of what your next step should be. If I'm ever feeling super restless, right, and I don't know what I should do, and I'm just kind of browsing Reddit on repeat, right, one of the things that I've found that will help me to kind of cope with that is to go outside and to take a walk, right? And I don't listen to any music, and I don't like ride a bike or go fast or anything like that. It's literally just like walk around my neighborhood, right? And in doing so, a lot of the times I'll be thinking to myself, God, I don't want to go on this walk. I'm bored, and that sounds like a terrible thing to do, right? And when I actually get out there and I actually find myself walking, what ends up happening to me is that immediately my disgruntledness points in a direction. Instead of being, I'm so bored, I don't know what I should do, it's, I'm stuck on this stupid walk and I wish I was at home doing X. And then I go home and I do X, and it's great. But like, I found that to be like a really consistent pattern for me, right? If I don't know what I should do, just disengaging from the activity and going somewhere else and doing something completely different that's very low intensity to the point where I get bored. In my boredom, I usually find that I'm drawn towards something, and if I then listen to that, it gets me out of my boredom. Have either of you experienced anything even remotely like
Of like being bored, which makes you creative? I know. I feel like being bored for me. Well, I guess it's a little bit different because I have ADHD, but like being bored for me is like it actually like it's almost physically painful, right? So it's like it's so like when I'm bored at work or something and I fall out of flow for whatever reason, and then it's like impossible for me to get in there, and then I have to like figure out how to like have to get up and take walks, and my boss gets mad, and like because I'm not being productive or whatever. So it's like I've never really had any situations where like being bored has been good for me and like maybe more creative. If anything, I feel like being bored has done the opposite for me, really.
Mm-hmm.
Or I feel like my most creative when I'm in really nice flow states where like I'm like, this feels fucking great. I'm just gonna put some notes down on a piece of paper and write something. And if I'm bored, then it's like,
Maybe being bored is the wrong word. Maybe I think the key thing here is I get like blank page syndrome a lot, right? Where there are so many things that I could be doing and so many things that I want to do that I find myself in a state of total indecision, right? Where nothing sounds good, right?
Or it's like jadedness, I guess.
Yeah. And like I say, I tend to describe that as boredom, but it's like a little bit different, right? And so when I get myself into that state, right, and then
that sounds more like to me.
More like what?
That sounds like more like being jaded to me.
Sure.
I'm bored.
So whenever I get into that state, right, the thing that helps me to figure out what I want to do is to remove options for myself for a discrete period of time, right? And it's the same sort of thing that Josh is doing here, right? You know, it's like he's playing chess. He feels bad about chess. Chess is weird. He doesn't want to study. He doesn't want to do it. It's just like tension there, right? He can't quite figure out what's going on, right? And the way that he figures out what to do is completely removes chess from his life for a month. You know what I mean? Just like from 100 to 0, right? And he goes, and suddenly there's this like entirely new set of options of things to do in his day, right? It's like literally why people go on vacations, right? Like it's you get yourself out of your routine and into a place where things are kind of at once new and novel, but also like low intensity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which allows you to genuinely relax, right? I think one of the most interesting kinds of things that I ran across, I think it was referenced in Deep Work, Cal Newport, but I'd also heard of it from my dad, who had like worked with the guy at University of Michigan. But there's this guy, can't remember his name, who did some research on like nature and restfulness, right? And kind of what the connection is there. And one of the things that he found was that true restfulness is not absence of stimulus. It is, and thus, like, attention to nothing, right? It is attention that is allowed to wander freely, if that makes sense. It's attention without focus. Unfocused attention.
Kind of like an open focus, you say.
Sure, yeah, an open focus, right? And so,
where it's like because a lot of people go through their lives always having really intense focus on their phobia vision, rather than letting everything come in and not really having a major focus. Was like kind of like you're taking everything in all at once, which is studies show it's supposed to be much more relaxing than actually trying to just sit there and be bored. Where it's like. Yeah. You're not bored, right? Because you're taking in so many stimulus, but it doesn't take much effort to because you aren't focusing on one thing.
And that's so what he found that walks specifically out in nature, like in a woods, are especially restful experiences because there's so much going on with the sticks and the leaves and critters and plants of all different sorts, and so your eye has a lot to go kind of look at and wander over. And there are a lot of lines to follow that are kind of natural, but there's not anything that's totally grabbing your attention and requiring you to focus, right? It's not like you're walking around in a city where you have to make sure that you don't get hit by a car and not run into somebody else or anything like that. It's like the most that you're going to. Yeah, and also cities are ugly, and there's advertisements everywhere, and all that kind of different stuff, right? It's like eye strain,
lights, and it's fucking bright and shitty.
So all of that, if you go out into nature and you find yourself wandering around there, then end up, like I say, studies show it ends up being kind of restful. So.
That's been my experience too. Really, like I haven't done it for a long time because where I used to live had a bunch of undeveloped areas. Now it's super developed, and now there's nothing there. So it's like it feels bad. Yeah, so I know what you mean exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, kind of my discussion question was like, what value might there be in taking breaks other than allowing time to adjust to the cumulative function? I think the thing that I want to posit is, taking breaks and doing things that are genuinely restful, like Josh says, they can help to inspire creativity, right? And it's an important part of performance to make sure that you're getting enough rest. And I, in particular, am very, very bad about doing that.
I think that's really important is that our subconscious bodies tend to spend more time processing things than our minds do. And it's like, have you ever heard of the like Einstein or Edison or like even the guy who figured out? I think it wasn't Pythagoras, but like the dude who was like in his bathtub soaking, focusing on something else, and he just like stood up and was like Eureka. Yeah,
Archimedes.
The big
Archimedes.
Oh, thank you, Archimedes. The big thing between them all was that they took some time off to do something else, like just not even focusing on the problem they were trying to solve, but like at some point while they were doing the thing that they weren't thinking about it just like came to them, just like randomly it came to them, the solution. So it's like that sometimes happens too, where like I'll be really focused on trying to figure out what goes next in my piece of music or something. I'll just go do something else for an hour, and then almost invariably I come up with something, right? And then I go back and I'm like, oh, this is great, right? So I think there's a value in doing that for breaks as well.
So have either of you ever had experiences like that in your study of League of Legends? where you
Yes.
kind of took a break, and in taking a break, kind of realized something about your game that you maybe otherwise wouldn't have figured out if you'd been focusing on it.
Good.
For me,
Good
I can talk about that for me, and that was the in fact, a lot of my mental game issues kind of come to me that way.
Mm-hmm.
Where like I'm trying to think about it, I'm like, I have no idea, I'm gonna go do something else, and then I'll just randomly come up with the answer. Or like another time is when I figured out about the reason why people go to lane at 136.
Mm-hmm.
That was actually me just like trying to figure out like what's going on here, and then I went and took a break because I was frustrated and played some piano, and then like I was like, oh wait, that makes so much sense. So then it kind of like just came to me, the
Mhm.
reasoning why.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can definitely say that I've had that experience, and it's something that I do a lot actually. If I ever get stuck on something, I just go do something else for a little while, and I almost always find the solution. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I know for me, I need I need processing time, right? If I don't have time in my day to just kind of sit there and like stare off into space and just process stuff, then it makes me anxious. Actually, like very seriously anxious.
I have been thinking of like, because I generally like don't take moments off of there are many unstructured parts of my day, but there aren't like times where I'm either reading some stuff on any platform I can get my hands on, or just always doing something.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about it, or the state you described, like when you take walks, and I just get into that state by listening to music.
Yeah, I find that too.
Actually, and that's just something that I'm constantly listening to music. Anyone that knows me probably thinks that my headset is somehow fixed
Glued to your head, yeah.
Never
yeah,
fucking is.
same for me as well.
And it's just something that does this for me.
I had a roommate in college who I'd always make fun of him because he would stand up from his desk and you'd have a dent in his hair from where the headset was.
Yeah.
I actually have a dent in my actual skull from my headset. So.
Oh my god! There we go.
That's just because you've had it one too many times.
Because legends say that I was born with the headset.
Truly a 5-head. Truly a 5-head. Yeah. So that might be one of my takeaways for this week, is like, as impossible as it is, I need to prioritize finding a way to put unstructured time back into my week. You know, I mean, like, it's easy now because I don't have a job, but like, even when I get a job, right, I need to find a way to make that happen, because it is so useful. So next quote, we have Josh talking about.
We are moving really slowly, aren't we?
Yeah, you're not kidding. No, we're moving at a snail's pace.
This book has a lot more to think about than we.
It does.
We're not going on to chapter 3, are we?
Probably not. Probably not.
Yeah.
No, this is probably just going to be finishing chapter 2. So, yeah, I mean, we went really far away too. We've gone very far with a lot of these tangents. So,
I mean, that's also
it's
all
fine.
relevant.
I don't mind. It's good.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, the next thing would be him talking about him and his dad. And he says, "We have been an elite team since I was 6 years old, and subsequently have been joined at the hip in our ambitions and, to an extent, our emotions. No matter how much perspective we tried to maintain, our senses of well-being often fluctuated with my competitive results. There was no way around this. After winning huge tournaments, all was well and the sky was the limit. When I was playing badly, everything could look bleak and our dreams absurd." And my note there again was just, like, what might we say to Josh if we were Jared Tendler? Right? How does what does it say to us when we see somebody that has confidence that fluctuates super wildly with their results?
Well, develop
we've
stable
got a-
confidence through.
Yeah, we've gone over this already.
Yeah, literally, it's already been the same thing.
Yeah.
So
So,
yeah. See above.
see,
Yeah.
winning and losing are not.
Listen to us
chemicals
for
in
once,
themselves.
Josh.
God, Josh, you're such a bad listener. Just after that, he also writes, though, it is true that I played with the knowledge that my dad's heart was on the line side by side with my own. But I also knew that he would love me regardless of the outcome, right? And I think, just as a note, right, this is another piece of information that suggests that his parents were smart folks that, like, get it. You know what I mean? Like,
Hello.
it's so important.
Yeah.
So he goes on his big fishing trip. He comes back and restarts his training with Bruce. And he writes, a few weeks into fall, Bruce saw that rushing through mechanical chess analysis was not what I needed. So he took a step back and reconceived our chess life. Our lessons now included raucous speed chess sessions with breaks to toss a football outside. We began to laugh and connect as human beings as we had in our first sessions years before. And I think this is something that, as a coach, I actually tend to kind of struggle to know when to do. Amusingly enough. It's... A lot of the time it can be difficult to know when it's correct to just take a break or whether it's correct to just kind of push through. So, given that you two have both been my students for a very long time and also have done a bit of coaching yourself, what kinds of thoughts do you have on that idea? Right? What factors do you look for when deciding whether to push through a tough time or to kind of back off and take a break?
Mostly, I think for me, it's the level of the students' engagement with what I'm saying and doing. If I feel like they're not able to listen, or rather, at least able to engage with me, then I'm like, okay, well, why don't we just take a break for a little while, and then come back, and then kind of just think about. So it kind of I think that's mostly it, really. I think I just mostly, if I just feel that it's not going to be productive.
Mm-hmm. I think you're right. Although, even then, right? I mean, I think that's like a very, very reasonable hard stop. But even then, looking at a couple of the students that I've had, it's been not necessarily that they're not making progress or not being productive, but they just aren't happy. And I guess that's kind of another thing that's...
For me, it's another... it's not about the students, or it's not about myself, when I decide to take breaks. It's when I feel like the only thing that's powering me playing is when there's only anger left and nothing in my play. That's when I know I need to take breaks most of the time. It's either anger or apathy.
Mm-hmm.
Like when what the things I say and think could be like said by some, like, I will dominate. When I reach that level,
oh my god, that is a really fantastic benchmark. I like that a lot. The Dom test. If I sound like I will dominate, then I need to take a break. That is hysterical. Oh my god, I love that. I love that. That's fantastic. Shout out to Dom. What a piece.
And he's good content that always manages me to keep myself grounded.
Oh, that's so funny. Yeah. No, I think that's good. Yeah. So kind of two different benchmarks. One being, are you making any progress? And the second being, is the student seeming frustrated and angry, or are they seeming super empathetic? And if either of those are true, then probably time to take a step back and kind of reevaluate what's going on.
Yeah, and also it's important to try to find if the reason for the or apathy
Of course.
is the activity that was being performed in the coaching.
Yes. Whether it's
if it's
coaching related or
related.
something else. Yep. Which is, of course, why it is important to always maintain a good human connection with all of your students, right? You know, they need to feel comfortable talking to you about whatever it is that's going on in their life and sharing in those successes and those setbacks. So, next quote, I think. He writes, "Then Bruce and I went to work. We plunged deep into the heart of the art, analyzing complex middle game and end game positions, studying the classics, developing my technical understanding. We started doing arduous visualization work, playing blindfold chess games, and working through long variations in our heads without moving the pieces." Right? And for me, this I felt was kind of important because it sorts of shows the move from a more kind of playful study of chess to a more focused, dare I say, deliberate study of chess.
That was about to say. That's just the teacher. That's the next deliberate practice step in front of a student.
So
that's exactly what it was.
He writes, "During those summer months when I questioned everything and decided to come back strong, I arrived at a commitment to chess that was about much more than fun and glory. It was about love and pain and passion and pushing myself to overcome. It might sound absurd, but I believe that year from 8 to 9 was the defining period of my life. I responded to heartbreak with hard work. I was self-motivated and moved by a powerful resolve. While a young boy, I had been all promise. I only knew winning because I was better than all the other children and that there was no pressure competing against adults. Now there was the knowledge of my mortality. I had lost to a kid, and there were other children who were also dangerous rivals." So, this I think is a kind of an interesting thing as well. Again, kind of returning to the idea of peak and their kind of stages of mastery, right? You know?
Yeah. That's the part where the student describes himself as the craft.
Yes.
And that there's the debate about developing a growth mindset, like identifying your craft as hard work, being good at it.
And so, I think when I initially read this, I actually kind of read it as the third stage, right? The commitment to become as good as possible, right? But I'm not sure because it's all happening so quickly, right? So, like, what's your read? What's your read? Do you think it's the stage where he's just sort of starting to take it seriously for the first time, or do you think this is the stage where he's committing to become the best that he can and doing everything?
Why not both? Honestly, I want like
True.
It's probably
I mean, he's a 9-year-old, right? Like, I mean, and now there's a lot of people, you know, when they stick with an art for their whole lives, it's never usually about being the best or like getting as good as you can. It's just that like they have a passion for it, right? They love it so much that, you know, outcomes really doesn't matter. He just wants to play the game. So, and it's like, and I think that at this point, it's pretty clear that he's committed himself to studying chess. So I'd say that it's probably stage 3 because it's very clear that he doesn't have. I mean, it's very clear that he wants to commit toward it. He may not have, you know, specific I want to win the world championship or whatever goal in mind. I think it's just he wants to play the game and loves it so much that he's willing to spend the hours and hours studying it. So, and that might be, you know, something that Peak maybe missed out on, where it's like it's not always that they make a conscious decision that they just want to master the art or whatever. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I think that might signal more of a stage 2, actually. Like after Dilga said it, I actually kind of went back, and although I initially read it as a stage 3, I think after reconsidering, I actually now read it as a stage 2, right?
And what's stage 2 again?
Stage 2 being the transition from kind of like we were saying, right? Like a more playful, externally motivated, introductory kind of a relationship with the activity to a more serious, I'm going to take lessons and I'm going to study and I'm going to do all of these things, right? To not necessarily be the best, but just be better,
Yeah, it's the stage where you define yourself as a chess player.
Yes, that too. And it's where the motivation starts to shift from external to internal, right? And this is distinct from among masters, where you find a third stage, where somebody goes from being, like a serious hobbyist to this is the activity that I'm going to devote my entire life to, right? And he looks back on it now, and I think maybe that stage for him kind of happened sort of early, and maybe he didn't realize that it was happening at the time, and so he's attributing it to and maybe it's just blurry here, right? Like I don't think that it has to necessarily be each stage in sequence, right? But like I think clearly we can say that he's somewhere in between stage 2 and 3 by the time he gets to this place, right?
For sure, without.
Yeah. So either way, this represents a period that anybody who's really seriously pursuing mastery will encounter at some point, right? Where it gets really tough, and you got to decide whether you're going to stick with it or not, right? So this was his first major heartbreak and his first major, I'm still going to do this, right? Which is not something that everybody does. And finally, he says, so then he gets back into chess, I think, and he is playing a match against another kid in another tournament, and he says, I'll never forget the feeling when I sensed my potential escape. Often in chess, you feel something is there before you find it. The skin suddenly perks up, senses heighten like an animal fleeing danger or prey. The unconscious alerts the conscious player that there is something to be found, and then the search begins. Talk about a on-the-nose, not unconscious competence. This is zone competence.
Oh yeah, right.
Right? It's that MGOP2 thing, where he talks about the Iowa gambling task and how the subconscious tends to sense patterns far before the conscious mind does, right? And they did so. For people who have not read Mental Game of Poker 2, the Iowa gambling task was a psychology study that was carried out. I think they said it was like in the 80s or something, that involved 3. So participants were given 3 decks of cards, right, and a virtual bankroll of some number of dollars, right, and each card in each of the decks would have an amount that would be added or subtracted to the total dollars, right? So maybe they get plus 20, maybe they get minus 80, maybe they get plus 100, that sort of thing. And one of the decks had very high values, like 80 and 100, but generally worked out to lose people money. And another one of the decks generally had lower numbers, but tended to gain people money, right? More positives and negatives. And so what they did is they had contestants pick just whatever card they want from whatever deck they want, and see how long it took them to recognize what was going on, right? And they found that there was a stress response in miniature happening. It's like they like measured like oiliness on the skin and like other things like this that relate to like the nervous system, right? And they noticed signs that the body was responding to like a stress was having a stress response when picking from the high variance low value deck, somewhere around like card 20 or something, right?
Yeah.
And when asked, the participants still had no conscious idea that there was any difference between the decks. They thought they were the same still. No patterns noticed. Then by around the 60 card mark, I think it was, they started to feel like they had a hunch, right? Which is basically what he's talking about here, right? You know, your skin perks up, and you're like, "There's something here. I know there's a pattern. I don't know what it is, but there's something here, right?" And this was the result of continued movement in the direction of the stress response to the negative deck, and so, you know, as the pattern gets seen more and more and more and more and more, it starts to create a larger and larger conditioned response in the body. And then around card 80, that was where it fully came into consciousness. People started to be able to describe what was different between the decks and what was going on, and they call that stage conceptual competence, right? So there's unconscious incompetence, just like in the beginning, or is it? No, it's zone consciousness, right?
I can't remember the proper.
I can't remember the proper term, but there's like, you know, it's a parallel to the adult learning model that describes
It's called intangible confidence.
intangible. I was trying to say intangible. Intangible confidence. Intangible confidence. Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna give up. You said it. You got it right. I don't need to say it again. It's all on you. You did it.
That stage. We would refer to it there for us. That stage.
Yeah, that stage. That stage where it's there and you don't know. It's just happening, but it's just kind of happening and you're not sure what's going on. Then there's the stage where you have a hunch and you don't quite know what it is. Then there's the stage where you know what it is and you can explain it, but you're still not perfect at it. And then there's the stage where you can do it consciously and it goes back into unconscious because you've trained it all the way up to, just like in the adult learning model, unconscious competence. So further evidence from another source that theory has some weight to it, right? I'm sure we've all had hunches before, right? But like, you know, there's some science behind that.
Happened in my life.
Yeah.
One of the things that I really likened this to was Galloway's inner game method of learning.
True.
Our bodies are often able to, you know, make those nervous system connections a lot faster than we can consciously, and so like, if we just let our bodies, if we just let our bodies take control of the movements that we're making, or even the things that we're learning. I've like tried to do more, you know, quiet mind inner game learning when it came to learning facts and concepts, and I seem to remember those a lot faster too than. I think that's because it's not just a conscious thing; it also seeps into your body faster, right? So it's like that really kind of affirmed for me, you know, the usefulness of Galloway's ideas regarding natural learning.
Yeah, I hadn't made the connection between Galloway's idea of like learning how to do by letting like distancing the two selves, as in just actually let the intangible competence speak.
Yeah, let's let it happen.
It's really interesting.
And I noticed that a couple of times that I've done Galloway's methods with League are the times that like I've mastered something much faster than anything else, such as like the ward at 145 that I started placing now, or like looking at the map more often, are things that I sort of tried Galloway's methods with, and I kind of only needed to practice them once or twice, and I kind of pretty much had them. Not fully an unconscious competence, but it's like much faster than if I were to try to like consciously say, look at map.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So.
Makes sense to me. Well, sick. So that brings us to the end of our chapter 2, and I don't know. I think that actually might be my biggest takeaway too. Is like I had also not made the connection between
Yeah,
Galway's
that is
methods.
mine for sure.
That's really interesting. I'm gonna have to go back and read that one again too. God, there's so many good books. Isn't that just a shame? How many good books there are?
No, that's the opposite of a shame, actually.
It's like, but I
It's a
can't.
shame
I can't
because I can't read
read
them all. But
all
it's
of
good
them
that
at
I have
once.
them to read.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, oh well.
Yeah, and then I also made the connection that like, even though League of Legends is a more mental game, it's still like execution is still a much higher part of it than I ever thought of it as, because even though most of it's game knowledge and just having the facts and the concepts in your head, a lot of it, but you also need to be able to execute it, and there's no better method of learning how to execute something than Timothy Galway's inner game method, because it's so simple. You just imagine yourself doing the thing, then you do the thing, and then you correct it. Like, okay, right?
Mhm.
So
Just do the thing for head.
it's a lot easier to correct it when you aren't in your own way, so to speak. If you aren't trying to bark commands at yourself or trying to consciously do the thing.
Mhm.
So.
Yeah. Come to think of it, I think that's actually how I've been primarily learning TFT. Right? Like, I've not been doing any kind of deliberate practice in TFT. It's been basically all just kind of playing, and then it's like I know what I want to do, right? But then
Or it's like you kind of like you tell your body what you think,
yeah,
and then
like
it just does it, or does something different, right? Whatever.
yeah. Either way, it's like I'm getting intuitions about what to do, and then I follow them, and then I reflect on that and look at what's going and
Right.
what actually is happening, and trying to then to just I don't try to make a correction or memorize anything or anything like that. I just note how the outcome differed from my expectations.
Mental observation, like, oh, it's not wow, I'm so bad at TFT, I fucked up. It's oh well, it turns out that
holy shit,
having all the items
Yeah.
isn't as good as Lysandra having all the items.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. It's another. Thomas Sterner, he wrote the Practicing Mind, and his method is pretty much Galway's method, but he called it the do, observe, correct method, where you don't do the thing, you observe what happens, and then you correct it.
Yep.
So it's kind of interesting that these people have unlocked these sort of methods of learning, and through different life experiences and methods and such, but like it's all the same.
Yep. Turns out that the human brain is the same no matter which body you put it in.
Yeah, pretty much.
And with that somewhat disturbing thought,
yeah, that sounds like a necromancer.
Yeah. How about have we all said at this point? Is it all three of us thinking about this Galway thing? Did we just discover the most important thing right at the end, or what is it for you?
That wasn't mine.
Yeah, what's yours?
Our discussion about control and what it means to have control, and sort of the locuses of focus that you can sort of. Because that was my mental game problem this week. I talked to you about earlier. Was
right.
Like
yes.
this feeling of needing to feel like I'm always in control, and so it's like needing to find ways to express control without trying to control my win-loss.
Yeah.
By the way, the plural of locus is loci. I don't know which pronounce it.
Yeah, I think it's
Nice.
Loci.
Is it loci? I don't know. That's a good.
But that's pedant. That's well the pedant.
Loci.
I think it's actually. I think you're right. I think you're right. It's loci. I think it's loci.
Nope. I took Latin for 4 years in high school. It's loci.
Loci.
Oh,
Okay. So the pronunciation. Loci.
Yeah, it's an endings things. It's us versus e. Or actually, it would be. It's not loci. I'll tell you that much. It's either locus. It's either loci or loci. And I would guess.
I'm pretty
loci.
sure I'm pretty sure isn't the C normally the S sound if it's like right before a vowel.
It is, but not in ancient Latin. It is in English usually, but in words that come from.
That's where they got that from.
Don't
Let's see here.
think so.
Oxford. That's weird.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. Let's don't
Oh,
trust me.
weird.
Trust the dictionary. That's the better way to do it.
Oxford says loci. It says it's loci. But it also has
Loci.
low key on there as well as
Loci.
IPA pronunciations.
Yeah. If I Google LOCI and then I hit the button, it says loci. I'm
Loci.
sure the stream is going to love that.
Wrong, by the way.
Anyway,
Coach, by the way.
Coach, by the way. Yeah. So we continue to move rather slowly on this one, but I am all about it. It seems like we're having some really good discussions.
I actually kind of like this so much more than Peak so far. I feel like I've made a lot more connections off of this book than on Peak.
To be honest, it's probably because we've read Peak for this.
I mean, I've read this one before this one, and I'm still learning a whole lot too.
Yeah, same.
I think we had all three.
We've book clubbed on Peak before clubbing on this one, and that's why we're enjoying it.
Yeah.
Also.
True. We're getting better at doing it.
I think also the things that we learned in Peak probably also help apply to this book too, so we have more to think about. I'm imagining that like if we read this book before Peak, it probably wouldn't have been as fun.
Yeah.
Yep. And Peak would have been more fun.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and cut the stream. Thanks, guys.
Gotcha.
Bye.